Hello, everyone, and thank you for signing in and joining us at Humi to learn about our new compensation strategy, how a retirement plan can be your secret weapon. So before we get started, I would like to do a land acknowledgement to recognize the original stewards of the land in which we live. It's important to acknowledge that the land we are living on in a path forward towards truth and reconciliation. And so we're in the city of, I'm calling in, from the city of Toronto. And so the city of Toronto acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. With this acknowledgement, we hope that we can all continue to educate ourselves and our teams and reflect on building a path forward towards truth and reconciliation. I would also like to take this time to acknowledge two very important teams. Firstly, the Commonwealth team, and a little bit about Commonwealth for those of you who don't know. And sorry, Connor, if I'm stealing your thunder momentarily, but Commonwealth is a fast-growing fintech company that is on a mission to make it possible for every Canadian to achieve a financially secure retirement. The firm provides an efficient, straightforward retirement planning and savings experience powered by an award-winning modern online retirement platform for a 21st century workforce. So very excited to learn more about the product today. And I would also like to acknowledge Humi's content team. Both our marketing team and our content team have been working behind the scenes to launch this webinar. And they're the dream team moderating the chat, flagging questions for myself and Connor, and bringing us a great online webinar experience. So let's talk about why we're here. Before I introduce Connor, it's important that we talk about the purpose of this webinar. So we know that the landscape has changed in how companies hire, but there still continues to be a challenge in securing outstanding talent and that is becoming more and more of a trend. So when we talk about closing candidates, I always ask people that I'm working with, do you talk about that top line offer details when you talk about compensation? Or do you dig deeper and understand what motivates them? What are they looking for? What does that TTC or total target compensation look like? We're learning more and more that savings and planning for the future is truly top of mind for candidates. And that's actually why this partnership is so important to Humi. And it's because of our shared philosophy and why Commonwealth is a core part of Humi's marketplace. And I do want to take this opportunity to give a little bit of a background because in terms of what we've done at Humi, so our Humigos identified that future planning and the concept of saving for the future was a critical part of their total compensation plan that we did not have in 2019. And so Commonwealth really came in and filled that gap. And I want to highlight some things that I learned on behalf of Humi in order to evaluate what was a differentiator for us in choosing Commonwealth as a partner. So first, from a planning perspective, I have never seen, and I cannot rave about this enough, Connor's probably sick of me talking about it at this point, but the built-in planning to figure out how much you'll actually need in order to go into retirement, it's a huge piece of education and really reduces that intimidating process and understanding of how much you actually need in order to save in conjunction with the government benefits. Also, it being a fully digital tool is really, really important for the future of work. And lastly, very importantly to us at Humi, this was actually a portable solution. So it stays with the employees for life, whether they are with Humi or choose to leave and go somewhere else. So from an experience perspective and truly finding a tool that would help them with their future planning, we saw Commonwealth as such an important part of our marketplace, that shared alignment in our philosophy, really working to make sure that the lives of employees and employers are made easier, is why we believe that Commonwealth is really breaking barriers around this topic and why we're so excited to be here talking about it today. So clearly employees are thinking about their future, and as employers, we need to be prepared with solutions that enhance the employee experience. And that's why we're here today to talk about how retirement planning can be your secret weapon in closing top talent. So thank you again, folks, for tuning in. My name is Andrea Bartlett, and I'm the Director of Human Resources here at Humi. With me today, I have Connor Bays, who is the Director of Employer Solutions at Commonwealth. And before I pass it over to Connor to take it away with the presentation and open up Q&A, I'd like to remind everyone that at the bottom of their screen, they'll see a Q&A function. So as you are asking questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use that function and not the general chat in order to ask your questions. That will be viewed by the team at Humi, and we'll ask those and start a Q&A session at the end. So with that, I will pass it over to Connor and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, and welcome everybody from as far away as Banff, or maybe locally here in Toronto too, dialing in from home or from the office. Really excited to be here today. Thanks, Andrea, for that wonderful intro. We're mutually excited about the partnership with Humi, and I can't say enough good things about the work Humi does. We share a very similar philosophy about making the lives of people, teams easier. Folks trying to set up solutions on the HR, payroll, benefit side for clients, and we love working with your team. So I won't spend as much time on it as I probably should, but we love working with Humi and serving clients together. As you mentioned, Connor, I'm the Director of Employer Solutions at Commonwealth. I won't spend any time on my background. I'll just say that my job is to work with many of the folks who might be on the line today, whether you're HR leader on the HR team, interacting with finance, part of the organization leadership, or on the team more generally. My job is to work with employers of all sizes to help them do what the title of this slide says, use a retirement plan to be your secret weapon, be a tool to help you achieve your business objectives and what you're trying to do on your team. So I'll spend a little bit of time laying the groundwork. I have some insights, some things to share with you to set the context, maybe bust a few myths along the way. That'll take about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But jumping right into it, retirement plan is your secret weapon. The first point we wanted to share with you and share some of the data around is how retirement security is actually a top priority for employees and job seekers. Andrea, you mentioned how Humi goes. The folks at Humi have been asking you about this. You're not alone in that. Just wanted to share with folks some of the data around what your employees are likely thinking around the topic of retirement security and how this might be one of, if not the most important issue to them. So Abacus Data, a national polling firm, conducted a survey just in April of this past year, asking about the concerns of working Canadians. And what they found was that 75%, or 3 in 4, of every worker that was surveyed as part of this pretty broad national survey said that they were concerned about having enough money in retirement. Pretty striking number. One of the other interesting things about that survey was just the stuff that retirement security and the issue of having enough in retirement actually outranked. So things like mental health, issues that are really important, like personal debt, job security. This survey was conducted in the COVID period, and retirement security, a greater proportion of people put that at the top, ahead of some of these other things that you're probably working on in your people team. So this is something that matters a lot to people. And again, your experience, Andrea, jives with what the data says about Canadians generally. One myth that we sometimes encounter, or you might hear from other HR folks, or might hear as an objection if you're talking to your executive team about retirement planning, is, I have a workforce with a lot of young people. Younger people don't care about this issue, right? Retirement's a long way off. It's something that my parents are thinking about, but not necessarily something that I'm thinking about if I'm a younger employee. So wanted to share with folks that that's not actually what the data says. That same survey from Abacus broke down respondents by age. And what it found was actually that the concern about retirement security was even a little higher among the younger age cohorts. So if you look at 30 to 44-year-olds, actually 85% of people said this was an area of concern for them. And even in that younger kind of Gen Z or millennial, early millennial, I know millennial is a very broad time frame, but folks, 29 or under, 75% of those people also said this was a top concern for them. So across age ranges, across bands of demographics, but also income ranges and other things, this is likely one of the top things that's on your employees' minds. They might be telling you this if you're running surveys or you're talking to them about it. But if you aren't, this is to let you know that it's probably something that's on their mind and something that you can use as a tool as you're trying to support your employees and support your other business goals. So we know it's a concern. The data says it's a big, something people are thinking about, a big concern for your prospects or your employees. What impact is that having, right? What effect is this having actually on the business? And so one area that's really interesting to look at is if financial security, retirement security is a top source of concern for people, how is that actually impacting them at work? This is an area that's getting a lot of attention and more is being learned about this. It's frankly been understudied in the past, but the conclusion, and is becoming increasingly clear, is that financial stress and financial insecurity, with retirement being one of the main pieces of that, as we just showed, is actually impacting workplace performance. So the statistic we're showing here on the left is from a survey that the Canadian Payroll Association ran in 2019. And they found that actually 43% of Canadian workers say that financial stress is impacting their performance. To put that in concrete terms, 1 in 4 workers spend 40 minutes of their workday distracted because they're thinking about their finances. Again, with retirement being one of, if not the foremost thing inside there, maybe along with job security or some of those other issues, that's causing that distraction and costing your bottom line if you're talking to your executive team, which we'll return to. So we've talked about how this is a top concern for people. It's something that job seekers and employees are struggling with. The second thing that we wanted to share with you is that they're actually looking for you to help them with this problem. So this is where the workplace retirement plan piece comes in, and the topic today around how you can provide a retirement plan as part of your compensation strategy. This is the role your company plays, right? Little bit of data around how employees are actually looking to you, the employer, for help with this. A little bit of survey data, again, from this year. So both of these statistics come from 2021. The first is from a survey that RBC ran, asking employees about benefits generally. And 68% of employees said that they would actually take a job that has good benefits over a similar job that pays more but doesn't have those benefits. So speaking generally to supporting employees with these issues, they want that. They'll take it over higher pay. Looking specifically at the retirement piece, this number is again from Abacus and again from just a couple months ago in June of 2021. And in that case, 74% of people surveyed said that they would actually be willing to forego a raise, forego a higher salary, if it meant they could get a better, or in many cases, get any form of retirement plan through their workplace. So employees know how valuable it is to have a plan through their employer, and they're worried about this issue. So you can help them with that. The last thing, the last kind of myth that I wanted to touch on, and this speaks a little bit to, Andrea, what you were saying around what Humi did for your own employees. There's a bit of a myth out there that we encounter, especially with mid-size or smaller organizations, if you're a few hundred people or smaller in particular, that providing a good retirement plan is something that big companies do. Something that the government does. If I'm a teacher or if I'm at a Fortune 500 company, I'm in a retirement plan. But if I'm at a startup, if I'm at a company with only a couple hundred or even a few dozen employees, or even a couple, this is something that's out of reach. It's too complicated. It's too expensive. It's too burdensome for me to do. And, Andrea, as I think you highlighted pretty well, there are new solutions available. Part of what Humi and Commonwealth are doing together is using, some of the modern fintech platform elements to streamline for you the ability to set up, run, and administer a plan that works for your employees, is integrated with your payroll system like we've done with Humi, and make it actually easy for you to provide something and address these issues. So we talked about employees want it, they want your help with it. One of the other things we wanted to share with you is just how valuable it can be for you to provide a good retirement plan to your staff. So how much value does having a good retirement plan provided by you, the employer, create for your employees? We actually had the opportunity at Commonwealth to do some research on this issue in partnership with the National Institute on Aging at Ryerson and a major pension plan called HOOP, the Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan. And what we looked at in this study was exactly this question. What is it worth to an employee to have access to a retirement plan through their employer versus alternatives like going it alone, like most people have to do if they don't have a plan through their employer? So that can mean, saving on your own, going to your bank, putting things in an RRSP on your own. And what we found in that research, and it was with a bunch of different partners and retirement and pension experts across the country, was firstly that a good modern workplace plan helps people in 6 key ways. Basically, if you're providing a retirement plan, it's helping people do 6 key things, and that's what creates that value. So it's things like saving, giving people the ability to contribute off of their paycheck, do it automatically, do it every month, make it a default when you hire someone, and get those savings accruing automatically over time. It's things like fees and costs. So you as an employer having a bit more buying power, doing things on a group basis means that you can help people get a much lower fee than they get on their own, going to their bank or going to an insurance company. It's things like investment discipline, number 3 here. So having investment choices that are professionally selected, that have some real thought behind them, and help people avoid some of the mistakes that we see them make on their own if they're doing this, again, on an individual basis. It's things like fiduciary duty. So again, having a plan that's professionally managed in the best interests of members results in better outcomes, and this is proven in the data. The 5th thing is helping people pool risk. This one's a bit more complicated. I won't spend too much time here, but essentially, if you're saving for retirement on your own, you have to basically manage the risk of outliving your money, and people have to adopt costly strategies like saving too much in order to avoid the risk of living longer than their savings. And if you're in a good scaled retirement plan, there are some things you can do, like accessing annuities, for example, that reduce that cost and reduce that risk. And then the 6th thing is portability. So Andrea, you touched on this. The Humi team communicated to you how this is important. This is all about giving people access to something that helps them do the other 5 things on this page, but consistently over time, so they get those compounding returns. They're not switching in and out of something. They're not getting bits and pieces of fragmented savings here and there. And they have a true plan for life that helps them both while they're working and through retirement. So these are the 6 things that create value. We've tried to incorporate them in our own solution. If you're looking at retirement plans, you want to have these 6 things in mind. So the big kind of conclusion of the work that we did, or the research on this, is not just what makes a plan valuable, but how much value does it create? And these numbers might seem a little bit shocking, but to just summarize them for you, what this research found, again, with the National Institute on Aging and other partners, was providing a good group retirement plan is worth an extraordinarily large amount to your employees. And the numbers I'm showing you here are basically looking at what does someone need to contribute over their career? How much they need to save over their lifetime for a typical employee, starting at age 25, retiring at age 65, living to a typical length. How much does that person need to save in order to have enough in retirement? And what the research did was compare that situation where on the left here, they have no retirement plan. So they're doing it on their own. They're paying retail fees. They are saving on their own. They're investing on their own. They're making some of those mistakes that people make. And the data says that that person probably needs to save about $1.3 million if they're doing this on their own with no group retirement plan. If you're providing a typical small group RSP, that's worth quite a lot. You're helping get them a lower fee. You're helping kind of create that saving structure. You're giving them some investment choices that are maybe more tailored for retirement. And the data says that that lowers the cost, that lowers how much they need to save by about $200,000 in lifetime value. And then the third column here, and this is where the numbers get kind of crazy, but what the data says is if you implement a retirement plan that does all 6 of those things we saw on the previous page and has these what we call drivers of value, what it's worth to that employee is over $900,000 over their career. So that person needs to save only $370,000 in their career in order to have enough to live on in retirement. So, short story, if you remember one thing from this page, is bringing in a good plan and giving your employees access to that scaled, modern group retirement plan can be worth $900,000 over their lifetime. And this is why your employees are asking you for a solution, because people intuitively understand some of these elements. The last thing I'll share is for employers who have brought in a retirement plan, who have maybe bought into this idea of having a retirement plan as their secret weapon, they're seeing results and they're valuing that retirement plan. So this is a survey from Maru Data that was conducted again just this year in September, asking employers who have these different benefits, how important are they to their recruitment goals? And what that found is that for employers who offer retirement benefits, the greatest share said retirement benefits were the most important part of their recruiting strategy, ahead of pay, which came second. So 42% of employers said that their retirement plan was extremely important to their recruitment, and 41% said it was very important. So for employers who are doing this, they know it's valuable and they know it's contributing to those attraction, recruitment, and retention goals. So I'll conclude the kind of presentation component. We'll get into the Q&A, but just to summarize, our key takeaways we wanted to share with you today. Number one, retirement security, top priority for your employees. Number two, a group plan that you can offer through your company by offering a workplace retirement plan is a much better way for people to build retirement security than doing it on their own. And that having that group plan can save your employees $900,000 over their career, almost $1 million in value you can create for your staff. And then finally, if you're looking at a retirement plan, the fourth message here is make sure you're thinking about those key value drivers. Try and find something that captures as much of this value as possible and gets that solution in your employees' hands. And Commonwealth, we're here to help with that. But with that, maybe I'll transition into the Q&A.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Connor. I love the myth busting that you shared there. So while some of the questions are coming in, we have some very specific to the product, which we'll absolutely address. I also want to start at a high level with a question that was sent to us around how to make the case. So for a retirement saving plan, we know that there are lots of benefits options out there, but how would you recommend a potentially new client or somebody that doesn't have retirement savings as part of their current benefits offering goes about making the business case to their leadership team?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, and it's one that we get pretty often. So I'd say maybe kind of three key points to make there. The first one is to focus on the business case. So some of the statistics and the data that we've shared with you today are meant to help. This is not a kind of nice to have. It's actually something that really drives the bottom line for employees. And there's lots of ammunition that you as an HR professional making the case to an executive team, for example, can build in to try and make that point. So some of that data is very important to ground things in. There is, empirical evidence and things you can point to that speak specifically to that business case element and how it's going to drive your goals, whether it's attraction, retention, or some of those other HR things. I'd say the number two thing is if you're proposing a retirement plan for your staff, you're going to get asked about budgeting and cost. So I'd say it's important to kind of come prepared with an idea of what you expect the budget and the cost to be of bringing in a program and how that balances with the ROI. And then the third thing I'd say is if those first two sound like daunting or difficult, the third thing is that you can get help doing this. So work with a partner. Something that we do all the time is work with HR teams to help them do those other two things. For example, if you want to figure out what it might cost your organization to bring in a retirement benefit, there's different elements that go into that. Don't feel like you have to figure it out all on your own. There's lots of benchmarks and modeling that a team like ours can help you do to come prepared with a really tight business case, budget, and kind of path forward that makes it much easier for an executive team to say yes and help you get this benefit in place.
Thank you for that. I'll also share some context, having gone through this fairly recently with Humi as well, is that having and presenting options to the leadership team is also very important. And there's a bit of a sliding scale in terms of what you can provide your team. If this is something that's brand new to your organization, as it was, for example, when we were implementing at Humi, we evaluated if there was interest and if it made sense for us to launch right away with an employer matching, or if we were starting smaller and having more of a long-term plan in order to understand usage, understand the importance to our team, and then ultimately work towards budgeting for an employer matching. That's actually something, Connor, that I think you advised me on as part of our journey walking through and building that business case, And it was something that frankly was not anything that had ever been recommended to me before, but was a really great way to open the door to that conversation to the leadership team while we were building that case and getting our own internal information. So also wanted to highlight that there are many different ways that you can launch a program like this. And it doesn't have to be everything all at once. Having a phased approach, especially as a small business, is something that that also will help you in building that business case.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just to build on that a little bit, Andrea, flexibility is key, and that's also something we can help you with. So if you're, in some ways, this might come back to, what field or sector are you in, right? If you're thinking about that competitive benefits piece, and you have prospects or folks that you're trying to hire asking you about a retirement plan, what those folks are expecting in the kind of public sector adjacent sphere, if you're running, say, a private school, where people are comparing you to the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, that's about a 9% employer contribution to that retirement plan. That's going to be a bit different than if you're a tech company where, say, a 5% contribution might be more standard. So, we can help you do some of that thinking too, and help you kind of make that comparison and benchmark. And the plans that we offer, and we encourage people to think of it this way, have that flexibility. So as in the case of Humi, you can start somewhere and get things rolling and ramp up over time. So you're not feeling like you need to, all of a sudden go from 0 to, a 9% matching contribution, which can be a pretty significant budget investment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Connor. And segueing into one of the questions that's come here is around the difference in expectations between industries or sectors. So the question reads, do we see any priority differences in the technology field where employees are incentivized to only stay for 1 to 2 years at a firm in order to maximize salaries?
Yeah, for sure. There are absolutely differences between fields, and there's maybe I'll broaden that question out a bit to say, how can a retirement plan help you with the retention piece specifically? Because I think that question's getting at in the tech field, people move around a lot. Is there a way for me to use this as a way to encourage them to stay? And so there are different things you can do there. So, for example, you can put in place some restrictions on the employer part of your benefits, so people can't kind of withdraw the money from the employer contribution side, at least. The other thing that we often work with employers on is to create some different employee groups or matching levels that can be tenure based. So that's another way you can use your retirement plan and basically say, if you join the organization and you're here in year 1, we're going to provide you a 2% matching contribution to encourage you to use the plan and build up savings. But that actually grows the longer you stay with the organization. So if you're 5 years plus, it goes up to 5%. And if you're here 10 years or more, it's at 8%, just as an example. So there are some creative things you can do there to kind of focus on that retention piece. You may not want to deviate too much from what's kind of standard in your industry, and often simpler is better in terms of communicating a benefit to employees, but those are a couple strategies that might help with kind of that line of questioning. Okay,
wonderful. Thanks, Connor. So another question that came in is around what actually is happening with the money. So this participant says, I've found in my experience that one of the keys to a successful experience participating in a workplace plan is to make sure that everybody is actually investing and not sitting on a money market fund. How does Commonwealth ensure that investors are in the right asset mix?
Yeah, really good question. I mean, this speaks to that third value driver of what makes a good retirement plan that we're talking about in the presentation component, and that's helping people avoid investment mistakes. The example that the person asking that question just gave is one of the best examples of a mistake that many people make, which is being basically inappropriately invested. In the case they mentioned, taking too little risk, right? So you have a plan member who has all their money in cash, not ideal from a retirement perspective. Similarly, you have people making the opposite mistake, which is someone who's in their 60s approaching retirement might have all their money in stocks, which is in the opposite direction, but equally risky, right? Because if the market drops tomorrow, that 60-year-old or 65-year-old is not in a position to kind of recover over time because they're starting to spend their money and they're at risk of kind of locking in those losses and not having enough money. So those are the types of mistakes that people can fall into, which the person asking was alluding to. The way that we help people tackle that issue specifically is by providing them an investment lineup, investment options that are, number one, tailored for retirement, and number two, are streamlined to help people avoid those exact types of mistakes that we've been talking about. So the specific investment funds that we use in our own product and for our own plans are something called a target date fund. Some folks on the line might have heard of this type of investment vehicle. It's probably, the gold standard for retirement plans in North America. If you are at a bigger company and you have a retirement plan, you probably have this as an option in your plan today. We believe it is truly the best way of helping avoid those investment mistakes, because what a target date fund does is essentially help people allocate their investments optimally based on their age. So how a target date fund works basically is, if you're a younger employee, you're going to be matched with a fund that is optimized for your retirement date, which might be 30 or 40 years in the future. And that fund will have a much greater share of its assets invested in higher growth, but higher risk investments like stocks. So if you're a 30-year-old joining the plan, you're going to be matched to an investment fund that is not in cash, as the person just alluded to, but is giving you that growth, right? It's a little riskier, but that doesn't matter to you because you're further away from retirement. You have a long time horizon in which to recover if anything happens to the stock market. The real power of these target date funds, and there's all kinds of good research on how effective they are, particularly in the US context, is every year that your money is in the fund and every year that you're aging and getting closer to retirement, the fund automatically balances away from riskier assets like stocks and towards safer assets like bonds. And this is happening totally automatically. So you're not expecting your plan members to be logging in and thinking, oh, geez, I've gotten a little older, I'm getting closer to retirement, I should probably rebalance my investments and shift some money out of stocks and towards bonds. You don't need to have them do that. The fund does it totally automatically. And so you get this, optimal allocation, this optimal mixture of investments for plan members happening automatically. And I think, as probably many folks on the line probably know, it's tough to get people to take decisions about stuff. You maybe get one shot on enrollment, but after that, it's going to be in the back of their minds. Retirement's not going to be the number one thing that they're logging in to change every day. That might be a generalized anxiety, but they have other things they're dealing with day to day. So giving them something automatic that's sort of set it and forget it and working in the background in the way I just described is a really powerful way of, getting that third investment kind of value driver working for them.
Great, very comprehensive. And so you had talked about the right asset mix and the fund itself. This next question has to do about the portfolios themselves. So are the plans exclusively BlackRock target portfolios? And what is the total MER that an employee is ultimately subject to?
Yeah, really, really good question. So I'll broaden this out a bit again and say that our philosophy as a provider, and we think the evidence really backs this up, is maybe somewhat counterintuitive, but the evidence is quite strong that providing too much choice to plan members is actually a bad thing. When you give people 50 different options, more likely they're going to do something that is worse for their retirement security than if you give them a more curated set of options that's tailored for their situation and gives them a bit more guidance on what they should do. So we've selected BlackRock as our investment partner to provide those target date funds that I mentioned. We don't choose to have 50 different providers on there and allow people to kind of mix and match and choose whatever they want. We take the approach that target date funds are the most evidence-driven solution for investments. And then we picked a provider that provided the best possible target date fund lineup, which for us was BlackRock. So we're not totally tied to using BlackRock, but we've selected them as the best provider out there for the needs of our plan members. And to getting to the second question, part of the reason for that is BlackRock has really great fees. And so we can pass that on to plan members as well, and significantly lower than what they're paying as a retail investor.
We're talking obviously today about the retirement savings planning being a secret weapon for retention, for attracting candidates. So there's also the notion that some employees may already be investing. So one of the questions that we have in the chat asks whether or not the plan allows members to bring in RSP funds from another organization.
Yeah, so yes, absolutely, and that's a big part of the value add here too. One that is maybe not the foremost thing that we talk about with employers, but becomes increasingly apparent as they start using the plan. So yes, employees can transfer funds in. So if we do a good job together, say, Andrea, we're implementing a plan, we're implementing Commonwealth as we did for your staff. One of the main things we'll do is help educate employees so they understand how their plan works, what's good about it, whether it's the fee, the investment program, or anything else. And if we do a good job of that, you're going to have employees say, "Hey, I have my Humi retirement plan through Commonwealth. This actually looks a lot better than what I'm getting from my bank down the street where I've had my RSP parked for the last 5-6 years. Can I move that money in?" And so, yes, they can do that. We allow employees to transfer in any existing retirement savings, whether it's in an RRSP or a TFSA. And one of the nice things about that is, firstly, it enables people to consolidate things in one spot. So they have a full kind of one-stop shop for their retirement picture. We have a lot of tools around helping people understand how they're doing that you and the team have seen. And then the second thing is that they can take it with them. It's a plan for life. So not only can they move that money in and get the lower fees of the investment program while they're working for you, but the way we've structured things is even if the employee leaves your organization, they don't have to stop using their plan. They can actually keep contributing to it directly from their bank account. Their fees stay low, so they don't get jacked up to retail levels. They keep paying low fee, and they can keep using their plan right through to retirement as well, where they actually need to start solving those retirement questions, turning it into income, and using it to fund their lifestyle. So our goal is really to give people that plan for life with you as the employer, the kind of channel to that and a key part of your compensation strategy. But the kind of core interaction with the employee actually continues far after they've left your organization.
Wonderful. And this question has to do with plan size. So, Connor, does Commonwealth offer plans for a very small organization, say 2 people?
Yes, we do. Yeah. So we don't have any kind of minimum for organizations. If you're 2 people, great. If you're 2,000 people, great as well. Our sweet spot is in that kind of mid-size and smaller range. So, and I think Andrea, that's one of the reasons we love working with Humi is I think your client base overlaps with the type of needs of ours as well. So yeah, we work with any organization size. We're happy to help you out.
Okay, great. And so this question, circling back to something you said before around education, which is actually such a critical part in successfully launching and educating your team members on why retirement savings is important. So how do you approach that younger generation who are solely interested in their own self-directed finance, especially with platforms like Wealthsimple making it so much easier for the average Canadian to manage themselves?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I think there's a couple elements there to break that into a couple pieces. So one is how do you talk about retirement to a younger workforce in general? How do you communicate the value, get them excited? And as we've shared, this is actually something that is on the minds of younger people too. But there are a couple of specific things around communicating retirement to a younger audience that we can share. And then the second piece is on people who want control of their own financial picture. They're seeing some of the stuff out there from the more kind of retail or trading providers, and how that factors in. So on the first part, I'd say there's a couple things specific to younger employees that you might want to focus on. One that we find resonates is to speak in terms of financial independence. So it's a retirement plan. That is the thing we're talking about here. But what does retirement mean? Well, it means financial independence, right? Having the ability to do what you want after full-time work, maybe even keep working if you want to, right? There's a lot of different answers people would have to that question, but really what it means is having the ability to not have to work if you don't want to, or do whatever you want with your time. And so that concept of financial independence is one that we see resonate with younger employees. The second kind of tactic that is important to focus on with younger employees is talking about the impact of compounding. And when you show the math to someone who's earlier in their career, it is quite exciting to be able to show someone that even if you're only saving a few bucks per paycheck, right, or maybe $75 per paycheck, if you are following those 6 principles we talked about today, and you have that money invested and you're allocated properly and doing some of those smart things, that will, with seemingly very little effort, turn into hundreds of thousands of dollars over your career and give you that financial independence. So focusing on that piece as well is a way to have some success there. And then on the kind of younger folks may want a bit more control over their finances, or there's a lot out there in terms of robo-advisor solutions or other things. The way we tackle that, I'd say, is we give people control. So any aspect of their plan, they can modify, they can add more funds, they can pick a different fund if they want to, they can add money, start contributions, give people the kind of keys to the car, so to speak. But we know from the data that the most important thing in some ways is make sure that the default path is the path that is likely to result in good outcomes. So don't rely on or count on someone making a good choice on investments. Have that be the default option, and then let them deviate from that if they want to a little bit. So pick a different fund if they decide they want to be a bit more conservative or aggressive. But design into your program by default the things that are likely to result in success. And 95% plus of members, even the young ones, are going to follow that default path. So you got to be really careful about what is your default at your organization and make sure it's something good. And then, give people some flexibility. So if you have folks who even just want the option to change what they're doing, they're able to do that in a way that's ideally self-serve, ideally, using a great modern technology tool, all those other things as well.
Great. Now, obviously, there's a lot of work that goes into building the business case, getting the approval, educating the team on the value, continuing those conversations on an ongoing basis about the value of a retirement savings plan and investing in it today for their future. But one of the questions that came through was around impact. So how can you actually tell if the retirement plan is having an impact on employees?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'd say there's a few elements there. There are some higher level things you can look at. So some of the tools you might be using today as a people team, surveys, satisfaction, your recruiting efforts, are they being successful, or some higher level metrics there that might be a little hard to prove direct causality, but you'll see the impact of. The second part of that I think is a bit more exciting is one of the things that gets us going, at least, is being able to see the real data on your plan in a way that's quite granular and looks at specifically those retirement outcomes is something that's quite neat. So I'll give a specific example. As a kind of tech forward company, we love being able to dig into a little bit of the data on plan members and how they're doing. One measure that we can track on an employer by employer basis is actually what is the retirement readiness of your team. So as part of enrollment, we have plan members go through about a 10-minute process where they set up their plan, they answer what are they going to need and how are they actually tracking towards that goal. It's a key part of the enrollment process. We can actually capture that information and share with you, the HR leader, or you, the executive team, how is the team doing on retirement security? How does that compare to average? Are you a little bit below? Are you a little bit higher? And how is that tracking over time? So part of the advantage of the kind of tech forward solution to something like a retirement plan is getting that kind of real-time granular data that you can build into your own analysis and say, hey, we've made a real impact on the retirement security of the team. Yes, on things like participation and things like, are people using it? But even more granularly than that, are we actually changing the retirement security picture for our employees?
Definitely. So this question comes from a participant who's asking about whether or not the accounts at BlackRock are with Commonwealth, or is Commonwealth the account provider, similar to a solution like Wealthsimple, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to dig too much into the financial plumbing of how group RSPs work, but I'll break it down a little bit. There's kind of three key players to providing a group RSP plan. Commonwealth, we're what's called the record keeper. So we provide all the stuff a member interacts with, all the payroll elements where we're kind of synchronizing with your payroll. Hopefully you're using Humi, we love that. But so we do all that stuff. There's a custodian bank who registers employees' RSPs or registers the group RSP with the CRA. So we work with a bank called Canadian Western Trust. They're one of the leading providers of custodian services. The money is held with them in trust. And then the third piece of the puzzle is the investment manager. So your money or an employee's money is actually invested by BlackRock. It always belongs to you. So the way group RSPs work is it's always held in your name and registered with the government in your name, and then invested by BlackRock to help grow your money. So that's kind of how the pieces fit together. But technically, Commonwealth, you would call us kind of the record keeper piece of that puzzle.
Okay. Now, one of the questions actually has to do with one of the slides that you shared around the lifetime impact. So the $900,000 career lifetime impact is very powerful. Can you talk more about how you came to this number and what are the most important features that attribute to that dollar amount?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say too that if folks want to see the actual research report, it was published in 2019, I believe, was when it came out. So you can find that on our website. It's on the National Institute of Aging site, and it's also on Hoop's website. So we can share that with folks as well. How that number was arrived at basically was a model of a typical employee, basically a kind of lifetime model calculation, and then using evidence-based assumptions on the impact of those 6 value drivers. So basically looking at a typical employee and building a model of their saving over their lifetime, and then saying, assume they pay the fees of a scaled pension plan or retirement plan, a modern plan like Commonwealth versus that 2% fee. What's the difference on the savings required to reach retirement security of that change? What's the difference of having risk pooling versus not? What's the difference of having an investment program that helps them avoid some of those mistakes or not? So it used a bunch of evidence-based assumptions, peer-reviewed essentially by retirement experts to come up with that model. Really good question on what makes the biggest impact. The one that often surprises people is the impact of that risk pooling piece. And this is one where employees tend to get the least help on this one. So if you think about 30 years ago, a lot of people belonged to defined benefit pension plans where you get a benefit every year until you die. Those types of plans gave you that risk pooling. Most people don't get that today. I won't spend much time on this one, but one thing we're really excited about with our own solution is actually helping people access that risk pooling through group annuities, which are a type of insurance product that actually helps them get guaranteed income if they want it. So we've actually implemented a solution like that in our own product to try and capture some of that value driver, but that was one of the biggest ones that feeds into that 900,000. Fees was another huge one. And then the third one was the investment element, so in that order.
Okay, great. And now in terms of the support that is needed, can you talk a little bit about what kind of support is typically offered by Commonwealth, whether it's setting up a new retirement savings plan or bringing over an existing, but using Commonwealth as the provider? Can you talk about what support that Commonwealth would give an employer throughout that transition?
Yeah, big time. I'll talk about support maybe in 2 senses, which are perhaps equally important, although one probably gets more attention than the other. So those 2 would be support for the employer team. That's usually the HR team who's doing the work to set up and run the plan. And then the second piece is support for the employees in using it. So maybe I'll start with the second one, which is the employee side. We do a few things on this that we find most impactful. The first is to focus on education and make sure it's introduced properly. So what we'll do is a team-wide education session. We did this with you, Andrea, and the team a few months ago, where you actually have a retirement specialist come in and spend an hour introducing the program, actually providing a demo of how people sign up and start using it, and answer questions in kind of a town hall format. So we start every implementation with that. And it's a really nice opportunity for people to get the information. We record it so they can get it afterwards as well. Along with that, we actually find it's pretty important to provide some one-on-one support as well. And this is an area where we're a little bit different, but we actually provide the ability for plan members to book one-on-one appointments with a retirement specialist as well. Not everybody uses it. I don't think you've used it, Andrea. You created your account probably without talking to someone because it's self-serve if people want it to be. But a certain percentage of employees will find it really helpful even to just have someone on a Zoom call I'm sharing my screen, I'm clicking through the steps to set up my plan, but I know there's someone there to ask if I need that help. So we provide that ability for people to book that one-on-one appointment whenever they want with someone who has a real deep experience in the area of retirement saving and planning. So I think those are the two main things on the employee side. On the employer side, again, equally important, we tend to have a dedicated person responsible for successful implementation. So you're not dealing with like a support line. You have someone you can call who's familiar with your payroll system, knows the ins and outs, and can kind of guide you through that process. And typically takes about 4 weeks to get up and running with us if you're a typical company. Having someone through that whole thing who you can talk to and guide you through it, we find is really helpful. And I'd say the last element there is one thing we're excited about. We've done this with Humi. We want to do it with other payroll providers too. We started with you guys, is having a bit more of an integration with the systems you're already using. So if you're using Humi software or Humi payroll, making it like a 2-click process to run your retirement plan deductions each month, so that there's no messing around with complex processes. You're not creating a ton of work for your team. That's a way of avoiding the need for a lot of support, right? Get that technology working for you, making it really easy.
Yeah, that payroll integration was definitely something that was super valuable, of course, to myself in administrating it. And I will also say that on the education piece and the support, something that we've experienced as well is the stigma around it's only the younger employees or younger generations who need to be educated on this topic. And so by being intentional about the way that we talk about retirement savings and intentional around the language that we use when it comes to education internally, that's something that's really important to make sure that we're not being exclusive in who we're looking to target, because this is meant to benefit all employees. And sometimes when we're talking about retirement savings, it's younger generations who may not have ever gone through the process or ever had support, whereas different generations within your workforce may already have an existing and hopefully have an existing plan. But whether they've had that access and the resource to be able to book one-on-one time with someone to talk about what their plan looks like, to talk about their goals and what their needs are, is again something that it's important to be intentional about when we're talking about education.
I just want to add one thing there, Andrea, because you make a really excellent point. There is a real strong equity and like DE&I element to retirement saving, not just on age, but also if you think about, women tend to have a wealth gap, a retirement savings gap. So there's an element of that, an equity element to providing a plan there too. New Canadians of color, like they're different groups tend to be also similarly disadvantaged in terms of a wealth or a retirement savings gap. So my colleagues, I'm not the expert here, but my colleagues, Joan Milway and Alex Mazer, actually just a couple months ago did a webinar on how retirement savings and retirement security fit into a diversity, equity, and inclusion framework. For folks interested in that element, I encourage you to check that out. It's on our website, but there's certainly a component of that here too that we didn't touch on much today.
Mm-hmm. And again, very top of mind for employers, especially in the wake of COVID and what COVID has done to the workforce. It's so important to be intentional about how you're designing your compensation plan and your compensation strategy, which hopefully our participants learned about in today's conversation. So Connor, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you for all of your insight for the discussion today and answering all of those thoughtful, cute questions that came through in the chat. For folks who are interested in learning more and reaching out to Connor, your information is on the slide that's there. And I also wanted to mention that there's a very useful ebook that Commonwealth has published. I believe the team has shared it in the chat as well, around the topic of attracting and retaining talent with a group retirement plan. So that ebook is available. The link is in the chat for those of you who are interested in learning more. And Connor, thank you again for the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll shout out just quickly the Humi benefits team too, if you want to learn more about the work we're doing together, if you're a Humi client already. The Humi benefits team is a way you can find us too. We're on the marketplace. If you want to learn more, we have a way to book a consultation if you want to figure this out for your own business. But thanks again for having me and spending time here today.
Thank you so much, Connor. And thank you for everybody for tuning in today. For those of you who are interested in our upcoming webinar, we are having a conversation with the folks at Brighton Early about growing your HR department. So if you're interested, you can register on the Humi website, and that is happening on November 25th at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in today, and I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.